Wow, a room full of people to discuss smell and odor. That is great. My name is Mark Jesus, and welcome to this session. We're going to try and have a lot of discussion. So we're going to zoom through a few slides. We have two speakers, and then we'll have a discussion, open up the microphone to everyone. I'm co-chairing this session with Carl Linden, who's here, and as it says, it's all about smell, and have a roundtable discussion. Just a quick slide here to illustrate that smell can emanate from a number of places through the chain of fecal sludge management. And we have to think about it if we want to implement sustainable solutions. Why a roundtable discussion? And really it's because it's a risk factor. Smell is everywhere. It affects technology selection. But we haven't really discussed that. We don't hear too much about odor. We need to understand where it comes, how it's conveyed, how it affects people, and how it affects technology selection, adoption, and so on. It's really a very important component towards the implementation of holistic solutions. Excuse me, I'm getting mixed up with the buttons here. So that's the rationale for having this session. As I mentioned, I'm going to zoom through a few slides, just a bit of background, then turn it over to two speakers who will talk about odor perception, some surveys, and then a bit of chemistry and science, telling you about the smell, and then open up the microphones. So as a way of background, just to state here that there is science. We can measure smell, and there are a number of methods, and we don't have time to get into a lot of detail here. The simplest method is the so-called dilution to threshold. And it's really a measure of concentration, and it's done by olfactometry, generally by panels. Here you see two ways, field olfactometry or lab olfactometry. You bring the samples back to the lab. And the dilution to threshold is simply how many dilutions do you need to accomplish so that the panel will not detect the smell. So it's a sub-threshold measurement. And just to give you a sense about what is a DT, if you're walking around and it's kind of smelling, it would be maybe in the hundreds. If it's really obnoxious, it's probably in the thousands. And if you're looking at stuff that is extremely smelly, like a rendering plant or really manual pit empty, you could be up in the millions. So this stuff is really smelly. And here I'm showing the concentrations that would bring it to the odor threshold of a few substances that we find in fecal matter. Scatol, indol, hydrogen sulfide, etc. And what you see here is that the concentrations are extremely low. And that means that just a little bit of these chemicals is going to go a long way in creating nuisance. And so it speaks for the challenge that we have in controlling the odors. There's a number of ways that you can control odors, and I'm not going to go into a lot of detail here, but they can be grouped in essentially three categories. One is preventing the odors to be formed or to be released. One is to control the odors as it's being formed so that it doesn't reach a receptor, and that can include capture or destroy the odor or transform it into something less odorous or non-odorous. There's a number of techniques here that can be used to control the odors. And then we'll hear more as well about sensory methods. Masking refers to adding another smell that will overwhelm your senses. And interference is kind of tricking you to think that things do smell nice. And we'll hear more about that and we'll discuss it too. We, in my lab, we have been dealing with biological methods to control odors, biofiltration, biological filters. So a few pictures here. The idea is passing air through a bed of bacteria. In its simplest form, it could be a bed of compost, and we're measuring how odor can be controlled. It's a very simple way. It's very inexpensive. It's scalable and very effective. And it's been implemented at wastewater treatment plant and other places. We've also been playing with ingredient of Febreze, which is a cyclodextrin, which in its cavity is great to capture smell. And we do that in the lab by doing it in a controlled environment. We're working with a reconstruction of a fecal smell, and we're smelling it before and after. This is just a graph to illustrate the sort of studies that we do. I'm going to turn over to Carl here to tell you what he does in his lab.
Thank you, Mark. Yes, in our lab, we're mostly focused on activated carbon type approaches to odor control. So specifically, we've been developing biochars and characterizing those for removing various contaminants. And from the air stream, we're looking at the ones that Mark talked about. We're also looking at some contaminants and odors that come up through combustion processes. So we're looking at some of the fecal sludge management practices that use combustion to treat the waste, and how do we deal with the odors and the smoke and the particulates that come off of those processes. So this is also another direction here. You can see some activated carbon and the mechanisms by which those can remove the odors up on the screen. So with that, and just to mention, Mark and I have a project that we're just kicking off on odor management, and each of our groups is looking at different aspects. We're going to look at the carbon side, Mark will look at the biological filtration side, and this is an add-on to the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation aiming at the toilet project. So with that, I'd like to invite some our speakers. The first speaker to come up is Kobina Fool. Are you here? Here you come. Good. And Kobina's on the Faculty of Civil and Geomatic Engineering at Kronstedt in Kumasi, Ghana. So thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mark. Mark said a lot of stuff I have to say, so then I'll do it in less than 10 minutes. So we can do the talk. Good. Hello? All right. I'm talking on assessing public perception of odor in a community in Ghana. And this work was has been sponsored by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation under the Sunny Up project. The purpose of the study, as Mark Riley said, odor has been a neglected topic for a long time. And it's the same in my country too. So we try to set out that there's nothing existing. So this survey serves as a baseline into further studies into odor. So our first purpose was to establish that there's odor nuisance in the community. And also serves as a baseline for further qualitative and quantitative studies. And then to identify other sources of odor within the community. And I have to emphasize here that this study, for the public toilets, when you get there, nobody needs to tell you that there's odor there because it smells really bad. So then we went out of the public toilet to the community, those who may not be necessarily using the public toilets, but are being affected by the nuisance that comes from the public toilet. So this survey was done in the community around the public toilets to see how far the odor disperses to them in their community. So this is a community we're talking about, and we have 1, 2, 3, 4 public toilets within that selected area. So this was the area that the survey was carried out. We had about 800 structured questionnaires and 800 people interviewed for the survey. So the response we had, we asked them if they noticed odor wherever they live. And out of the response, 89% of people noticed odor from this public toilet facility. Then this was the age balance for the survey, female and male, was very balanced, 57%, 42%. Then now the advanced levels, we asked them, is it so annoying, is it not annoying, and all that. And then we realized that most of the people complain of odors from the public toilets and the nearby drains around in the community. So here we established that the odor doesn't come from only the public toilets, but also comes from other sources like the drains, refuse dams, and people urinating around in the community. So those are also other sources of odor in the community. But for my work, I'm really concentrating on the fecal slag aspect. So I'll concentrate on the odor from the public toilets. Then the frequency of the odor. You can see a lot of people smell the odor almost all the time. 153 out of the 804. High values for very annoying all the time, and oftentimes very high values in the area. So now some few questions that I've thought about. Before an odor can be perceived by a person, first as Mark Riley said, they have to be formed somewhere. They have to be transferred into the atmospheric phase. They have to be exposed to a population. Then the population detects this. Then you have pages as whether it is odorous or not odorous, whether it's annoying, then it becomes a complaint. So now for scientists or engineers, our problem is that you stop it from being formed, or we prevent it from being transferred, or prevent the population from getting exposed to the odor when it's created. So those are some of the questions we would like to answer in the future studies. Okay. Yes, so moving forward, this is what we intend to do. We have to characterize the odor. So we characterize the odor, we see the effects of additives on the odor production. Yes, then we do some ventilation studies for the odor within the rooms. Then we do atmospheric modeling to see how far the odor travels from the source into the community. I think I'll end there. So the conclusion is the survey established that odor is a nuisance in the community. Other sources of odors were identified, and then the need for effort to curb the problem. Thank you very much for your attention.
We'll take 2 questions before we go on to the next speaker, so we get a chance to ask any questions you might have. So please raise your hand if you have a question for Kobina.
Hi, Alison Parker from Crawford University. Really interesting presentation, but I was wondering how you quantify the difference between extremely annoying, very annoying, annoying. How did you get people to classify odours in those different categories, and how do you think how did you avoid the bias of people just telling you that it really smells so that you would maybe improve their sanitation?
That's the difficult. But then what happened was the questionnaires was administered in a local dialect. So we could speak to them to understand. If I speak, you didn't understand, so I don't have to speak. But then I ask you, is it really, it depends on how the person responds. You see, you can just act out an expression, it's not good at all, a pompa, or something like that. So you know it's extremely annoying, or you say, oh, it's okay, I can manage. So you also have to use your discretion and the response. It's very difficult to get it there and then, but then sometimes that is one of the bias of this kind of assessment. So.
Any other questions? Yeah, one more over there. Raise your hand so you can see the
much for the presentation. I would like to know if you take into account the hygienic aspect of the odor in this different sanitation system. And also, I would like to know if you characterize odor in different types of sanitation, because we have many in Ghana. I think that's my question.
Let me start from the second one. For this one, that's what I presented as next steps. You're going to do the engineering aspect, the characterization and the modeling and all that. But then, for this very work, we are concentrating on dry sanitation toilets in the community. And what's the first question again? That's it, right? Okay.
Thank you very much. We're going to move into our next speaker, and after that, we're going to really open it up to the audience to hear from you what your experiences are with Odour, and get your experiences and get some feedback and get some questions. But first, we're going to have our last speaker, Charles Serpouille. He's with corporate R&D at Permanent in Geneva. They've been doing a lot of the odor characterization and masking studies. So thank you, Charles. That's okay. Yeah.
Good afternoon. So I will present you some aspects of the malodors perception and malodors analysis of latrines in Africa and in India. And I want to precise that this work was achieved in partnership with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. So I'm working for the Firmenich company. It's one of the biggest companies that produce fragrance and flavor. And Firmenich is involved into the RTTC project to find a solution against the malodors of latrine. So the malodors of latrines drive the perception of lack of hygiene and diminish self-respect and dignity. So covering this malodor with a nice perfume will communicate a message of good and healthy sanitation in a hygienic condition. And Firmenich creates fragrances and delivery technologies. They have a lot of experience in that field. So what is a fragrance? What is an odor? So an odor is a mixture of volatile substances that we can perceive. So to detail this, let's take an example randomly. A stool. A stool is composed of a lot of different molecules, but just some of them will pass into the air. And this is a critical step, because in order to smell it, the molecule must be into the air. Then, when you smell, you suck the air into your nose, and the molecule will reach this region here that is magnified there. So the molecule will interact with the chemical sensors that we call olfactory neurons. And these neurons will code this chemical signal and will send a message to the brain that will create the perception of the odor. So what is critical here is that if the molecule cannot interact with the olfactory neuron, we will not be able to smell it. So to create a perfume, the perfumers need to know the enemy. The perfumers need to know which molecules compose the malodors of latrine. So, as you notice it, the malodors of latrine comes from the sludge. And my colleague, a few years ago, went on the field in India and also in Africa to collect samples of the sludge and to identify the key odorants into this sample of sludge. And this work was published in Environmental Science and Technology. So what they found is that we have 4 categories of odorant molecules. First, the acids that will give this vomit, cheese, or dirty socks note of the latrine's malodors. Then we have the phenols with the P crystal that will give the animalic note. And the nitrogen compounds with indole and cattle that are more fecal. And at last but not least, the sulfur compounds that will give the cabbage and sewage notes of the malodors of latrines. So now we know the enemy, but perfumers need a stable reference to test their creation, to be able to say, okay, my creation can mask or cover these malodors. But you probably imagine it's not possible to use fresh sludge because it's not stable and it's not practical. So we make reconstitutions with synthetic compounds. So one of these reconstitutions, we call it fecal, with 4 molecules, butyric acid, bicresol, indole, and dimethyl 2-sulfide. We made another one with 8 molecules, more complex, we call it latrine, with all the acids, the bicresol, scatol, in addition of indole and dimethyl 2-sulfide. From previous work, we did another reconstitution of stale urine because we think that stale urine is also very important. And it's composed of bicresol, indole, trimethylamine, that will give this fishy note of the stale urine, dimethyl 2-sulfide, and also viniguia. So now we have the reconstitution, but we don't know if these reconstitution in India or in Africa can evoke a similar olfactory experience to that of the use of a latrine. To answer this question, we made a sensory survey in Ahmedabad, Nairobi, Durban, and Geneva, where participants have to smell our reconstitution in addition of pleasant odor, and these odors were delivered by sniffing sticks. So this is a sticks where that contains our reconstitution. You can open it and smell it. So if you are courageous enough, you can come to me after this session to smell our reconstitution, but also nice odors. So this work was done in partnership with a lot of organizations and peoples, and a big thank to these people because it won't be possible without them. So we interview more than 400 people, and an example of the result that we obtained is that, okay, our 3 reconstitutions were strongly were perceived as unpleasant. Because here is the pleasantness, so I don't like to I like, and -3 is I don't like to 3 I like, and 0 is neutral. And what you can see here is that in every country, our reconstitution were perceived as malodors, and odors of food or perfume were perceived as pleasant odors. So, and in addition of this, we can say that people recognize these odors as odors emanating from feces and latrine. So what we found also is that the simple reconstitution with 4 molecules do the same job as a reconstitution with 8 molecules. So from these results, we can say that butyric acid, bicresol, dimethyl 2-sulfide, and indole are strong contributors to the latrine's malodors, and this confirms and consolidates previous studies. So now we have a stable reference of latrine's malodor that will help perfumers to create efficient perfume to cover these malodors, but it's also a step forward to understand the composition, but also the perception of malodors of latrines. So, thank you very much for your attention, and I'm really pleased to answer your question.
Any questions? Yeah.
Thank you very much. When I've been to wastewater treatment plants over the years, I get the impression that operators get used to a smell. Is there any sort of, is that true, or to what extent do people get used to a bad smell that other people that are fresh to it don't perceive?
Okay, so for treatment plants, I don't know. But what I know about to be used to an odor is it can be to 2 different mechanisms. The first is adaptation. So when you put a perfume on you, first it will be really strong. You will sense it as, okay, I put some perfume. then it will disappear slowly. And this mechanism is called adaptation. So your neurons will respond first with a high response, and then we decrease the response in order to be aware of other molecules. So when you are in a room with a smell, you will smell it first, but then this smell will decrease with the time. So it could be an explanation of this. And the second explanation can be about the perception, because the perception of an odor is linked to the memory, but also to emotions. So with this, we can say that it interacts with a very high level of comprehension. So it's very difficult to find mechanism in that explanation that I do. In fact, it can act also. You will perceive an odor differently because you are not the same culture, you don't have the same experience with another odor.
Okay, one more.
Thank you for a great presentation. Can you comment on the four compounds you identified? How easy are they to break down if you were trying to combat them as an odor source?
Okay, difficult question. But for example, butyric acid, that will give this strong cheese and vomit note into the fecal odor. Actually, they are used by bacteria for energy. So what we have found is that a stool will first produce a lot of butyric acid, but then this acid will decrease because it's degraded by bacteria. It has been also reported that when you have trouble with intestine and you have diarrhea, you will produce a lot of butyric acid. So in fact, you can let the time do the job, in fact, because bacteria will degrade butyric acid. Then the problem is that indole and putresol will remain. And I don't know how to remove this compound from the sludge.
Okay, I want to bring Kavina up here and Mark as well, and should open the floor to general questions, general comments, as well as further questions for both speakers. Please stay here. And Kavina, please stay. Okay, so I can't see anybody. So Mark, go around and get you. Yes, make this nice.
Hi, Andy Narracon from What's Up. It's just a comment. I think this is the most important session in the whole of the conference. Because so malodor is the key determinant for raising demand for sanitation. I've seen this comment come out so many presentations. If you want anyone to pay for sanitation, if you want anyone to with little resources to allocate their attention to sanitation, you've got to make it odor free. No matter how poor anyone is, no one will pay for a smelly toilet. That is a fact. It's human nature. It's the disgust factor within our genetic makeup, and that's why our waste smells so bad. We want to stay away from it. So brilliant research. I think that path we saw earlier. There's lots of ways to break that down, that odor, and the sooner we get to that, that's the sort of surefire way to get more demand for sanitation.
That's a good comment. And I was thinking earlier that certainly it's a matter of dignity, but are we doing maybe a disservice to mask the smell so you don't think it's a problem? Because the smell obviously creates a reaction. So be careful. This is disgusting, or we have to maybe get away. So that's another aspect of it. Should we mask it and maybe think it's not there anymore when it is actually still a problem? So, you guys have a comment?
Yes, this is very important, but one thing to say is that we cannot mask an odor in a non-hygienic condition. So if the toilets are not clean, it's useless to put perfume in it, because the vision is also very important. So when you enter the toilet, okay, bad smell, but if you see a very dirty toilet, it will be difficult to use it. So I think that a very important factor is the cleanness of the toilet, and then we can do something with the odor.
Just to add a little bit, because of this smelly nature of this toilet, it becomes a problem in even siting, looking for sites to put this toilet, because nobody wants it near this or at home, because then after 1 month, 2 months, I'm going to sleep in this smell on your life. So then it's difficult looking for sites, these toilets, even when you have the money to put them in place.
My question is addressed to the gentleman from Ghana. And I was wondering if you spoke to people to ask them how did they cope? Were there any indigenous coping methods to deal with the odor themselves?
Did you have any option? They had just have to be in it like that. No coping strategies. You're doomed.
Does anyone have an experience to relate? Someone has observed some interesting odor survival mechanisms here. Someone can share? Yes.
Thank you very much. Sir, I'm very wondering about the perfume you have discussed about other eliminations. Could you please tell me that we use perfume on our hands or our clothes before handling the pieces, on-site pieces? Is it possible that we will not feel the otherness of the pieces? One. Second one, do you have any laboratory check of its allergy matters and chemical aspects as well? No?
I'm sorry, I don't understand.
One thing is very important that have your perfume have its quality that would just utilize on our nose or our hands before managing the pieces on the septic tanks as well. That we will not feel the odor when we're using the perfume you produce it. The second one is it clear that it's allergy free and chemical free?
Okay.
And it's a market available? Is yes, then how it's possible to provide local communities with low socioeconomic status?
Okay. For the first question, to take a perfume to put that on the hand or on just under the nose when people are manipulating feces, okay, it's possible, but this is not the goal of my company. In fact, they want to make the latrine smelling better, but why not? I would say. For the second comment about allergen, this is what you concern. Okay, my company had a program to check if a molecule can be an allergen, and we have to be equal to the standards of Europe, of the European standard, and we are working on it. But the perfume that they create contains no allergen, to my knowledge.
I can also comment on the fact that there's been a lot of studies on health effects of odors, and it's mostly psychological. It's not like a direct chemical effect as if you're exposed to much higher concentrations, say, of benzene or carcinogen or other chemicals. Question here.
Hello, I'm Shrey Saxena from University of Delaware. I really liked your presentations. I was interested in that one graph that you showed, the differences between how people in different countries kind of assess different odors. And I just wanted to ask you if people can adapt themselves to kind of, in the long run, see the malodors from feces, and they would get a neutral stance on these malodors in the future. Would that be possible?
So if I understand well, if they can adapt to these malodors.
Correct.
That's a question.
Correct.
Oh, okay. When I worked with these compounds into the lab, I will adapt. So after to manipulate such compounds with a high purity, after that I smell my reconstitution and I say, okay, I don't smell anything anymore. But now with the difference in culture, I don't know if the people will adapt more quickly or not, and different culture, I have no clue about this.
I have more of a comment than a question, but it occurs to me that another really important aspect of odor control is odor elimination from any end-use products that people are trying to market. And a comment about that is these charcoal briquettes that Emily Woods shared during the previous session. They seem to be odor-free, and I think it's because obviously if somebody's going to use briquettes for cooking food, they better not smell like food. But they use a solar pasteurization process where all of the water is evaporated, and so all of the volatile compounds must also be evaporated, and somehow that also results in there being odors when they're combusted. But so my final comment is we need to expand this research into understanding the odors of user products as well, the products that are coming around odors.
Yes, and this was really when you look at the little Gates diagram, added a number of great arrows, and it wasn't really meant to be comprehensive, but we have to look at the entire, almost like entire life cycle of the fecal sludge and all the byproducts. It's very well understood that it's through that.
Hi, Brian von Hersen from the Climate Foundation. I'd like to make a comment quantifying the magnitude of the problem. So there's some literature that indicates that the presence of indoles and scatols can be on the order of a few micrograms per gram, or a few parts per million. Mark, our moderator today, put up a chart showing scatol sensitivity at 2 parts per trillion in terms of detectability. So that gives us roughly a factor of 1,000,000 in order to solve the problem. In other words, if you volatilize most or all of the scatol in a feces sample, you've got to go down another factor of 1,000,000 to get past the limit of detectability. So the fact that our nose is a logarithmic detector that can detect many orders of magnitude means that we have to address this problem with a log 6 reduction in some species in order to fully address the problem. That gives us a good feeling for the amount of work we need to do, and it underscores the need for chemical, biological, and physical means to actually reduce odor. Thank you.
So with this problem, okay, we can try to remove the odor, but what we can do is use it. So this is the story of jasmine. Jasmine has molecules that will smell flower, but it contains also indole. If you remove the indole, it doesn't smell jasmine anymore. So we can do is a perfume with all the floral compounds without indole, and we will add the indole with our waste. So it smells jasmine. And, and this is the state of the art of the perfumers, is to combine the molecule that smell bad with other molecules to make a mixture that smells good. This could be a solution, but I will precise in hygienic condition, if I would say.
Thank you.
I was a bit very impressed with your presentations. It's kind of very innovative to me. And so in order to get answers to my question, let me use a case study, if you don't mind. In the course of producing struvite, you work with source-separated urine, and I can tell you firsthand that I had a hard time convincing lab mates to join me precipitate struvite from urine, stored urine, and that the odor could be so pungent that even your perfume is not perceived. So I want to find out, are you fighting others with others, or are you fighting others by trying to eliminate them? And in order to get that, I'd like to ask you, someone like us, working with that kind of urine, stored urine, even in the open, it's not easy. When you finish the precipitation process to dry your precipitate to get the struvite, it's another problem. How do you manage that kind of thing? Because masks are in categories, but there are some categories of masks that you put on and you still perceive the other. Thank you.
Yeah, let me just address that very quickly. You know, we had only 1 hour. Originally we thought we would have 2 hours, but we could do a whole day or 2 days and invite a number of experts that work on photocatalytic odor destruction, that work on various absorption, biofiltration, a number of methods for odor control. So we do not pretend that we have the comprehensive solution to every odor and cover all the expertises. There are, of course, a number of techniques that we don't cover here. And as was raised earlier, one has to look at every aspect of the chain of handling the material and look at it in a comprehensive way so that ultimately the odor doesn't reach the receptor. And whether it's by preventing the odor to be formed, preventing it to be in the product, capping, treating emissions, capturing emissions, etc. So, and that is a very complicated problem with multiple ways of addressing it. I don't know if you want to comment or anyone.
Maybe just about urine. The matrix is very important to release a compound into the air. And okay, for the still urine, for example, a compound that would be really nasty and very extremely powerful is trimethylamine. Trimethylamine is caustic, in fact. If you put the trimethylamine into water that is acidic, it won't be released into the air. But if the pH rises to above 9, so you will have a lot of trimethylamine that will be released. That could be something that we can think is about matrix effect, so where the odor is.
Yes. More questions, or someone has please share?
This has been a very interesting discussion, and I agree with the colleague from WASUP that odor is one of the really critical factors in sanitation adoption and use. What I've noticed, I think one of you asked about are there steps that people take to combat odor? And I think that in many countries I've seen the use of mothballs in various types of sanitation facilities to combat odor. And that's also a strong and not very pleasant odor. So I was thinking it would be interesting to hear about other cultural experiences of what people do to combat odor.
Yeah, who wants to speak? We've heard about it. I mean, we know about sawdust as well.
If you want to make an effective perfume that smells very hygienic, put bleach in it. I think bleach is very international for cleanliness.
Yeah, it is true. But what is very interesting with odors, and different people respond differently. Some people don't like the bleach odor, and for many people, yeah.
So Brian von Hersen from Climate Foundation. So a major deficiency of the Western toilet is that the odor has to go past your nose on the way to the ceiling fan, which is a big problem. And so as some alternatives, in fact some diverting dry toilets, the smell goes down. And if it goes down, then you never smell it. And that's a huge factor. If we can find toilets and latrines and other systems, a 2-watt fan is all it takes to make the air go down instead of up. That's a kind of possible, for a non-flush system, there's so many merits to that kind of approach. 2 watts in a battery, and it's potentially a solution.
For a little solar panel, 2 watts is really nothing. Other innovative solutions that you've seen in the field or implemented experience firsthand.
Just a comment. Rachel Sklar, I work with pit latrine upstairs in Kenya, and it's just a comment about removing odors along the full sanitation chain. We found that pit latrine upstairs spend about 40% of their revenue on chemicals in order to mask the smell during their work, chemicals like paraffin or motor oil. So just a comment on that.
Raise your hand who had a question.
I think we covered the point before. Yeah, I'm Gregor, working with Soil Humanity. I'm here in Switzerland. I just wanted to maybe hear some options or from experiences about low cost and low tech options to treat odors from urine storage, especially. If you have any experiences to share.
Yeah, well, so we've heard that pH is hugely important with odors for urine. I'm hearing a lot about sawdust being mixed with fecal matter to contain odor. We are working in a lab at this time, and that allows us to do things in a very quantitative manner, rather than anecdotal. This works, this doesn't work. We don't have the silver bullet at this point, but as I showed in the slide, we're working on a couple options. I think the idea of maybe reusing biochar down the road is very interesting, because ultimately it's very efficient absorbent. All kinds of odors.
Hi, my name is Hester Vottenaert from Akervoorol in the Netherlands. I heard, I didn't smell it myself, but I heard that urine dye toilets produce much less odor problems. Can anyone talk about it?
I can't. I can.
Hi, Andy Narrow from What's Up Again. Just relating the experience of Clean Team in Kumasi, Ghana. Yes, it was a urine diversion toilet specifically because urine contributed 80% or 90% of the smell of a toilet at home. So we designed the toilet to divert the urine just to get rid of that potential to cause odor in the home. And just expanding on that, so that Clean Team uses a chemical, and that chemical contains a biocide and a fragrance. And the biocide acts to limit the production of those compounds that produce the bad odor. But it only works for about 2 or 3 days. But also the fragrance, but that is around odor, not just to eliminate odor, but to present a positive odor, a positive fragrance. So when customers have remarked that they like when the toilet comes into their home because it produces this lovely smell around the house. But obviously, 2 or 3 days, then the smell starts to pick up, and malodors start appearing, and then that's when customers are on the phone saying, "Can I pick up my toilet? It stinks." And for Clean Team, the determining factor for how often we collect the toilet and change the cartridge is not about volume and how much you can store in that container, but how smelly it is. So for us as a business, really trying hard to make it a financially viable business, the key factor in that is how frequently we collect the toilet from someone's home. At the moment, it's every 2, 3, or 4 days. Now, if we could make that every 2 weeks, then business would be well with them. So odor is a key determinant factor in success level.
More experiences from folks. They have about 2 questions. Time for 1 or 2 more questions or comments. Any more experiences you want to share?
Thank you for your presentations. My name is Samuel Mandinga. My experience with operators who use the gun pump or gun pump. They use masks, but there's a tendency like you remove it from their mouth and you contaminate it with cause value, because that is Turkey. So most of them opt not to use it, but I don't know, they are used to that smell because you contaminate your hand is dirty and you put them out. So when you put it back, you affect yourself. And for transferring that, we ensure that our containers are safe such that the smell doesn't go to the neighbors or the customers. When you are conveying that sludge from the pit to the central collection point, make sure it's safe. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we're out of time for today. I want to thank the speakers. I want to thank the audience for great feedback and contributions. If you're interested, stay tuned. We are going to send a survey to people who have who are interested. So if you want to be on the survey, send us an email. And certainly this is just the beginning of a greater conversation that we hope will continue. Yeah, and come smell the stick over here if you want. Thank you very much.